Jimin collapses backstage after hearing Jungkook's song was about HIM microphone broken loudly. A shocking backstage collapse reveals a secret song, buried emotions, and a truth Jungkook never meant Jimin to hear. The floor rushed up to meet him. "Turn it off," Jimin whispered, but the music kept bleeding through the walls, Jungkook's voice cutting deeper with every note, until Jimin's knees buckled and the world went black beneath the roar of applause. When he came to, the first thing he felt was the cold. Concrete against his palm, sweat clinging to his neck, the echo of a lyric still ringing in his skull. Asterisk, if you ever hear this, you'll know it was always you. Backstage was chaos disguised as control. Headsets crackled. Stylists moved like ghosts. Someone called his name, distant and panicked. Jimin blinked, his vision swimming, and forced himself upright as a manager crouched in front of him, eyes wide with fear. "Jimin, hey, breathe, you fainted. What happened?" What happened was Jungkook's song. What happened was the way the melody had started soft, almost apologetic, before unraveling into something raw and unguarded, nothing like the polished performance they had rehearsed. What happened was the pronoun that slipped, the memory only two people shared, the habit only Jimin would recognize, Jungkook's voice breaking on the exact syllable he always did when he lied to himself. "I'm fine," Jimin said automatically, even as his chest ached. He pushed to his feet, ignoring the dizziness. "I just need water." But the truth followed him, relentless, as he staggered toward the dressing room. He could still smell the stage smoke, metallic and sweet, could still feel the vibration of the bass in his bones. The song had reached its final chorus just as he collapsed, and the crowd had screamed louder, unaware they were cheering a confession. Hours earlier, Jimin had been laughing. He remembered that clearly, sitting cross-legged on the dressing room couch, humming off-key, teasing Jungkook for packing like a caged animal. Jungkook had smiled, that small, private smile he saved for moments when he was terrified but trying to hide it. "It's just a song," Jungkook had said, rubbing the back of his neck. "Don't overthink it." Jimin hadn't. Or maybe he had, but in the safe way, assuming the song was about fame or youth or some abstract heartbreak fans would project themselves into. He hadn't imagined his own name stitched between the notes. Now, alone in the quiet dressing room, Jimin sat on the edge of the vanity and stared at his reflection. His makeup was smudged beneath his eyes, turning him into a stranger. He pressed his fingers against the glass, grounding himself. He had spent years perfecting control of his voice, his body, his expressions. He was the one who smiled through pain, who swallowed words until they became manageable. Loving Jungkook, if that's what this was, had been filed away with other impossible things. The door opened softly. Jimin didn't turn. He knew who it was before he heard the familiar uneven breath, the hesitation in the footsteps. "I didn't know you were back here," Jungkook said. His voice was still warm from singing, still trembling. Jimin closed his eyes. "You sang it differently," Jimin replied. "You changed the bridge." Silence stretched between them, heavy and fragile. "I couldn't lie anymore," Jungkook said. "Not tonight." Jimin laughed, sharp and humorless. "You think tonight was the time to stop lying?" Jungkook stepped closer. In the mirror, their eyes met. Jungkook looked stripped bare, stage confidence gone, replaced by the boy who stayed up too late writing songs he never planned to share. "I wrote it after you stopped talking to me," Jungkook said quietly. "After you started pretending everything was fine." Jimin's jaw tightened. He remembered that time too, the months of distance disguised as professionalism, the way he'd convinced himself that wanting more was selfish. That silence had been his shield. "You could have ruined everything," Jimin said. "Do you know that?" "I do," Jungkook answered, "and I still sang it." The words hit harder than the collapse. Jimin turned fully now, facing him. Up close, Jungkook smelled like sweat and cologne and something achingly familiar. "Why?" Jimin asked. Jungkook's hands trembled at his sides. "Because I was tired of surviving songs that weren't true. Because every time you smiled at me like nothing was wrong, it hurt more than if you just left." Jimin's breath caught. He wanted to be angry. He wanted to lecture Jungkook about risk and consequences and the weight of being watched. Instead, he felt something inside him crack open. "You think I didn't hear myself in that song," Jimin whispered. "You think I didn't recognize the night you wrote about? The stupid rainstorm, the broken umbrella, the way you wouldn't let go of my wrist because you were scared I'd disappear." Jungkook's eyes filled. "I was." "So was I," Jimin admitted. The admission settled between them, fragile but real. Outside, the crowd was still chanting, hungry for more. Inside, the world narrowed to the space they shared. Jimin sank back onto the chair, suddenly exhausted. Jungkook knelt in front of him without thinking, instinctive, like he always was when Jimin was hurting. "I didn't collapse because of the song," Jimin said after a moment. "I collapsed because I've been running from it for too long." Jungkook nodded, tears slipping free. "I'm sorry I forced it into the open." Jimin reached out, hesitating only a second before resting his hand over Jungkook's. The contact was electric, grounding. "Next time," Jimin said softly, "warn me before you tell the world my secrets." A weak smile broke through Jungkook's tears. "There won't be a next time like that." They stayed like that for a while, breathing together, letting the adrenaline fade. Whatever they would call this, love, fear, truth, it was no longer buried in melody alone. Later, when the manager knocked and told them it was time to leave, Jimin stood steady on his feet. The collapse had shaken him, but it had also stripped away something false. As they walked down the corridor side by side, Jungkook brushed his shoulder, tentative but hopeful. The song would belong to the world now. But the truth behind it, finally, belonged to them. The hallway doors slammed shut behind them, cutting off the echo of fans and cameras, and the silence that followed was somehow louder than the arena itself. "Did you see the manager's face?" Jungkook muttered, running a hand through his hair as they walked. "They know." Jimin didn't answer right away. His heart was still beating too fast, his thoughts tangled between fear and something dangerously close to relief. "Everyone knows something now," he said finally. "They just don't know what." They reached the elevator reserved for staff. The doors slid open, metallic and unforgiving, and when they stepped inside, the space felt too small, the air thick with everything unsaid. The doors closed. The elevator began to descend. Jungkook broke the silence first. "Say it," he said, voice tight. "Say you're angry, yell at me, don't stand there pretending you're calm." Jimin let out a shaky laugh. "You really want honesty now, after you sang a love letter in front of 50,000 people." Jungkook's eyes flashed. "I didn't say love." "You didn't have to," Jimin shot back. "You practically carved my name into the chorus." The elevator jolted slightly, and Jimin grabbed the railing out of reflex. Jungkook noticed immediately. "You're still not okay," Jungkook said. "I will be," Jimin replied. "I always am." "That's what scares me," Jungkook said quietly. "You don't fall apart until you're alone." The words landed too close to the truth. Jimin turned away, staring at the glowing numbers above the door. He remembered nights spent staring at ceilings, rehearsing smiles for the next day, convincing himself that distance was maturity, not fear. "You think I wanted to hear that song like that," Jimin said. "You think I wanted my chest to cave in Backstage while everyone cheered for my heartbreak." Jungkook stepped closer. "I didn't write it to hurt you." "But you sang it knowing it would," Jimin replied, voice rising. "That's the part you don't want to admit." Jungkook swallowed hard. "I sang it knowing it would end something." The elevator stopped. The doors opened to an underground parking level, dimly lit and nearly empty. The air was cool, smelling faintly of oil and rain. They stepped out, the argument following them like a shadow. "And what?" Jimin demanded. "Our careers, our friendship, or just your patience?" Jungkook laughed bitterly. "Don't act like we were still just friends." Jimin froze. For a moment, neither of them spoke. A car passed at the far end of the garage, headlights slicing through the dark, then disappearing. "You don't get to decide what we were," Jimin said slowly. "Not after I spent years convincing myself you didn't mean the things you did." Jungkook's voice cracked. I meant all of them. Jimin turned back to him then, eyes blazing. Then why did you let me walk away? Because every time I reached for you, you pulled back, Jungkook said. Because you smiled and told me you were fine while building walls I didn't know how to climb. Jimin felt his throat tighten. I was protecting us. Or protecting yourself, Jungkook countered. The accusation hurt because it was true. Jimin exhaled sharply, his shoulders sagging. You don't understand what it's like to live inside my head, he said. Every feeling is a risk, every step is watched. Loving you felt like standing on a stage with no lights, no script, and millions of eyes waiting for me to slip. Jungkook softened then, the anger giving way to something raw. I wasn't asking you to shout it, he said. I just wanted you to stay. Jimin looked at him, really looked at him. The same boy who had once followed him down empty hallways just to talk, who hummed unfinished melodies under his breath, who loved too loudly and hurt too deeply. And if I say I still want to run? Jimin asked. Jungkook didn't hesitate. Then I'll let you, he said, but I won't pretend it doesn't hurt anymore. Rain began tapping against the concrete above them, a soft, steady rhythm. Jimin closed his eyes, letting the sound wash over him. When I collapsed, Jimin said quietly, the first thing I thought wasn't fear, it was relief, like my body finally said what I wouldn't. Jungkook stepped closer, careful, as if Jimin might shatter. Say it now. Jimin opened his eyes. I'm tired of hiding. The words felt dangerous and liberating all at once. Jungkook's breath hitched. Then let's stop. Footsteps echoed suddenly from the far side of the garage. Voices, staff, reality rushing back in. Jimin glanced toward the sound, then back at Jungkook. The moment was slipping, fragile and unfinished. This doesn't fix everything, Jimin said. I know, Jungkook replied, but it starts something. A manager called Jungkook's name sharply. Jimin took a step back, the familiar distance settling between them again, but this time it felt different, less like a wall, more like a pause. We'll talk, Jimin said. Really talk. Jungkook nodded, eyes steady. I'll wait, I always do. As they walked in opposite directions, the song replayed in Jimin's mind, no longer just a performance, but a line crossed, a truth exposed. Above them, the rain kept falling, washing the night clean, while neither of them knew whether what came next would destroy them or finally set them free. The van door slid shut with a dull thud, sealing Jimin inside a moving cage of leather seats, dim lights, and unspoken tension. Are you seriously not going to say anything? The manager snapped from the front seat. Jimin stared out the tinted window, watching neon lights smear into colorless streaks. What do you want me to say? He replied calmly, too calmly. That I fainted because the air was bad. The manager scoffed. Don't insult me. That song was not approved. The lyrics were changed. And you, his voice sharpened, you collapsing backstage turned it into a scandal. Jimin finally looked up. A scandal for who? For everyone, the manager said. For the group, for the image, for the narrative we've spent years building. Jimin smiled faintly, a habit he hated because it came automatically when he was cornered. Maybe the narrative was fragile to begin with. Silence fell heavy after that. The van stopped. Jimin stepped out into the night air, cool and damp, his lungs filling with something that felt almost clean. Inside the building, chaos waited. Jungkook was already there. He stood near the practice room door, arms crossed, jaw tight, eyes burning with something dangerously close to defiance. The moment their gazes locked, the world narrowed again. You okay? Jungkook asked, ignoring everyone else. Jimin nodded, still standing. That's not an answer. Neither was your song, Jimin shot back. The words cut, sharp and fast. Staff pretended not to hear as they hurried past, but the tension was impossible to ignore. Don't do this here, Jungkook said under his breath. Then where? Jimin replied. On stage, in lyrics, you already chose your battlefield. Jungkook's lips parted, anger flashing. You think this was easy for me? I think you enjoyed finally being honest, Jimin said. even if it meant burning everything down. Jungkook stepped closer, voice low and shaking. I was burning anyway. The practice room door slammed shut behind them as Jungkook pushed it closed, cutting off the outside world. The room smelled like sweat and wood polish, familiar and suffocating. You don't get to corner me like this, Jimin said, packing. Not after tonight. You don't get to pretend you're the only one hurting, Jungkook shot back. Do you know what it's like to write a song you're terrified to sing because it might expose the one person you love? Jimin stopped cold. Don't use that word. Why? Jungkook demanded. Because saying it out loud makes it real. Jimin laughed bitterly. Because loving you was never safe. Jungkook's voice cracked. Neither was loving you. The confession hung in the air, raw and undeniable. Jimin pressed his fingers to his temple, breathing hard. You think I didn't notice, he said. The way you watched me, the way you waited, I noticed everything. And every time I chose silence. Why? Jungkook asked. Because I was scared, Jimin admitted. Scared that if I leaned into it, I'd never be able to pull away. Jungkook stepped forward again, eyes glossy. And I was scared that if I stayed quiet, you'd disappear anyway. For a moment, neither of them spoke. The room felt smaller, heavier, like it was listening. You know what people will say now, Jimin whispered. They'll dissect every glance, every note. They'll turn it into something ugly. Jungkook nodded. I know. And you still sang it. Yes, Jungkook said, unwavering. Because I'd rather face the fallout than keep pretending you don't exist in my music. Jimin's breath hitched despite himself. He turned away, hands clenched. You've crossed a line. So have you, Jungkook replied softly. You crossed it the moment you broke down backstage instead of letting it pass. Jimin looked back at him sharply. You think I chose that? No, Jungkook said. I think your body told the truth before you did. The words shattered something fragile inside Jimin. He sank onto the floor, back against the mirror, eyes burning. I'm tired, he confessed. Tired of being careful, tired of carrying feelings I'm not allowed to name. Jungkook crouched in front of him, hesitating only a second before reaching out. Then don't carry them alone. Jimin laughed weakly. You make it sound so simple. It's not, Jungkook said. It's terrifying, but it's real. A knock on the door broke the moment. Sharp, insistent. Open up, a voice called. We need to talk now. Jimin and Jungkook exchanged a look, fear and resolve colliding. Jimin stood slowly, straightening his jacket, the familiar mask sliding back into place. But this time it cracked. Whatever happens next, Jimin said quietly, tonight changed everything. Jungkook nodded, eyes steady, heart exposed. I know. As Jimin reached for the door, the weight of the song, the truth, and the consequences pressed down on both of them. No longer hidden in melody, no longer safely unspoken, but alive, dangerous, and impossible to take back. The door opened to a room, already charged with judgment. 3 executives sat at the long table, faces unreadable, tablets glowing faintly in the low light. The manager stood to the side, arms crossed like a guard. Jimin felt the familiar pressure settle onto his shoulders, the kind that reminded him exactly where he stood in the hierarchy of things. Sit, one of them said. Jungkook took a step forward instinctively, but Jimin stopped him with a subtle shake of his head. He sat first, posture straight, expression calm, the mask fully in place now. Jungkook followed, though the tension in his body was unmistakable. We're not going to pretend tonight was an accident, the executive began. The song was altered. The performance was emotional, and Jimin's collapse backstage turned it into something much bigger than music. Jimin folded his hands. I didn't plan to collapse. No, the executive replied coolly, but you didn't plan to stop it either. Jungkook leaned forward, voice tight. This is on me. All eyes turned to him. I changed the lyrics, Jungkook continued. I sang the truth. If there's blame, it's mine. Jimin shot him a sharp look. Don't. But Jungkook didn't back down. I won't let this be framed like Jimin lost control. He didn't. One of the executives raised an eyebrow. And what exactly was this truth you felt compelled to share? The question hung heavy, dangerous. Jungkook hesitated, just for a second. Jimin could see the war behind his eyes, honesty versus survival. It was personal, Jungkook said finally. That's all. That's not enough, the manager snapped. Personal turns into speculation. Speculation turns into rumors, and rumors destroy careers. Jimin inhaled slowly. Then maybe we should talk about why a song with emotion is treated like a threat. The room went still. The executive's gaze hardened. Careful, Jimin. I am being careful, Jimin replied evenly. I've been careful my entire career. Tonight wasn't recklessness. It was humanity. Humanity doesn't sell, the executive said. Consistency does. Jungkook clenched his fists. Fans aren't stupid. They felt it because it was real. And now they'll dig, the executive replied. Into your words, your glances, your past, into you. He turned to Jimin. Into both of you. Jimin felt a flicker of fear, but beneath it, something steadier. Resolve. You taught us to connect, Jimin said. To be honest in our art. Tonight, Jungkook did exactly that. At a cost, the manager muttered. Jungkook laughed bitterly. There's always a cost. You just prefer we pay it quietly. The tension snapped. Enough, the executive said sharply. Here, what will happen? The song will be labeled as fictional. Statements will be prepared. There will be distance, less joint schedules, less fuel. Jimin's chest tightened. Distance, the word echoed. Jungkook shook his head. You're punishing us for telling the truth. We're protecting the brand, the executive replied. Jimin stood. The movement was sudden, decisive. Every eye followed him. With respect, Jimin said, voice steady but charged. The brand exists because people believe in us, not because we erase ourselves. The manager looked stunned. Jimin. I collapsed because I was overwhelmed, Jimin continued. Not because of scandal, not because of guilt, and I won't apologize for having a heartbeat. Silence swallowed the room. Jungkook stared at him, a mix of shock and something dangerously close to pride. The executive studied Jimin for a long moment, then exhaled slowly. Sit down. Jimin didn't. If you force distance, Jimin said quietly, you'll create exactly what you're afraid of. Suspicion, fear, cracks. The executive leaned back. You're playing a dangerous game. So are you, Jimin replied. The difference is we're the ones the audience watches. The room held its breath. Finally, the executive stood. We'll revisit this tomorrow. Get some rest, both of you. Dismissal. Outside the room, the hallway felt colder. They walked in silence until they reached the stairwell. Jungkook stopped abruptly, pressing his hand against the wall, breathing hard. You didn't have to do that, Jungkook said. Yes, I did, Jimin replied. Jungkook turned to him, eyes shining. You stood up for us. Jimin's voice softened. I stood up for myself. That was the truth he'd avoided for years. The quiet stretched, intimate and fragile. I meant what I sang, Jungkook said quietly. Every word. Jimin swallowed. I know. You don't have to answer me now, Jungkook added. Or ever, I just needed you to hear it. Jimin stepped closer, close enough to feel Jungkook's warmth, his unsteady breath. I heard it, Jimin said, and it broke me and it saved me, both. Jungkook let out a shaky laugh. That sounds like us. Jimin allowed himself a small smile, genuine this time. It does. They stood there, not touching, not running, suspended in a fragile moment of truth. Whatever the world decided tomorrow, whatever consequences waited, something irreversible had already happened. They were no longer hiding from themselves. And for the first time, that felt more terrifying and more freeing than anything else. Morning arrived without mercy. Jimin woke to the vibration of his phone rattling against the nightstand, the screen already glowing with missed calls, messages stacked like warnings he didn't want to read. His head throbbed, his body heavy, as if the collapse from the night before had never truly ended. For a moment, he lay still, listening to the faint hum of traffic outside the hotel window, trying to remember what it felt like before everything cracked open. He didn't get far. The first notification he opened was a headline. Jimin's chest tightened. Fans had clipped the performance, slowed it down, analyzed every breath. The lyric change was circled in red. His collapse backstage was already a looping video, captions ranging from concern to wild speculation. Some were gentle, some were cruel, some were dangerously close to the truth. He exhaled shakily and sat up. A knock sounded at the door, sharp and impatient. "Jimin," the manager's voice called. "We need to talk now." Jimin opened the door to find the manager flanked by 2 staff members, all of them tense. "You've seen it," the manager said flatly. "Yes," Jimin replied. "I've seen enough." "They're asking questions," the manager continued. "About the song, about you, about Jungkook." Jimin didn't flinch at the name. "They always do." "This is different," the manager snapped. "This time they're connecting dots." Jimin met his gaze, because the dots were always there. The manager's jaw tightened. "Jungkook is refusing to post the statement." Jimin's heart skipped. "What do you mean, refusing?" "He says it doesn't reflect his intentions," the manager said. "He wants to write his own." A spark of something hot flared in Jimin's chest. Fear, admiration, panic, all at once. "Where is he?" Jimin asked. The manager hesitated. "Studio B." Jimin didn't wait. He grabbed his jacket and stepped past them, ignoring the protests behind him. Studio B smelled like coffee and sleepless nights. Jungkook sat on the floor near the console, phone in hand, eyes dark and focused. He looked up when Jimin entered, relief flashing across his face before hardening into resolve. "They told you," Jungkook said. "They did," Jimin replied. "You're really doing this." Jungkook stood. "I'm done letting other people explain my feelings." Jimin crossed the room in quick strides. "You realize what this could cost you." Jungkook didn't back away. "Do you realize what it already has?" The air between them crackled. "You think I don't feel the pressure," Jimin said, voice rising. "You think I'm not terrified every time my name trends." Jungkook's voice broke through, fierce and emotional. "Then why are you still hiding?" The words hit hard. "Because I don't know how to live without armor," Jimin shot back. "Because I was trained to survive, not to confess." Jungkook stepped closer, eyes shining. "And I was trained to perform, but that song wasn't performance, it was me bleeding." Jimin's breath hitched. "You bled all over me." "I bled for you," Jungkook said softly. "There's a difference." Silence fell, thick and suffocating. Jimin looked away first, pressing his fingers into his palm. "If you release that statement," he said quietly, "they'll tear you apart." Jungkook nodded. "I know." "And if you don't," Jimin continued, "they'll keep dissecting us until there's nothing left." Jungkook smiled sadly. "There's already nothing left to hide." Jimin laughed under his breath, a sound edged with exhaustion. "You're unbelievable." "You love that about me," Jungkook said before he could stop himself. The words hung there, naked and dangerous. Jimin turned back slowly. "Don't say things like that so easily." "I'm not saying it easily," Jungkook replied. "I'm saying it honestly." Jimin felt the walls inside him tremble. Years of restraint, discipline, fear, all of it pushing back against the truth standing right in front of him. "I can't promise you anything," Jimin said. "I can't suddenly be brave." Jungkook's gaze softened. "I'm not asking you to be brave, just don't disappear." Jimin stepped closer, close enough that their shoulders nearly touched. "And if I stay," he whispered, "you have to understand that it will be messy, slow, painful." Jungkook nodded without hesitation. "I'll take messy over empty." A staff member burst in then, breathless. "The executives are here. They want you both." Jimin and Jungkook exchanged a look, fear, trust, and something fragile binding them together. In the conference room, tension crackled like a live wire. The executives didn't sit this time. "You're trending worldwide," one of them said. "This is no longer containable." Jungkook stepped forward before Jimin could stop him, then stopped trying to contain it. Jimin's heart pounded. The room erupted. "You think this is about freedom?" An executive snapped. "This is about responsibility." Jimin surprised himself by speaking up. "Responsibility doesn't mean erasing ourselves." The executive turned sharply. "Are you admitting the song was about—" "No," Jimin interrupted, voice steady but shaking. "I'm admitting that it was honest, and honesty is what people felt." Silence followed. Finally, the executive sighed. "We can't stop people from believing what they want." Jungkook glanced at Jimin, a question in his eyes. Jimin nodded, just once. Jungkook lifted his phone and pressed send. The statement went live minutes later. Not a confession, not a denial, just a declaration of artistic truth, of emotional honesty, of refusing to apologize for feeling deeply. The fallout was immediate. Praise, backlash, support, rage, the world split in two. But inside the room, something settled. As they left the building side by side, cameras flashing outside, Jimin felt the familiar fear, but beneath it, something new. He reached out, fingers brushing Jungkook's sleeve, barely noticeable but real. "Whatever happens," Jimin said quietly, "I don't regret hearing that song." Jungkook smiled, eyes wet. "I don't regret singing it." They stepped forward together, into the noise, into the consequences, into a truth that could no longer be undone. And for the first time, Jimin didn't feel like collapsing. He felt like standing. The car crawled through the sea of flashing cameras, like an animal moving through fire. Jimin kept his gaze forward, jaw tight, hands folded neatly in his lap. Jungkook sat beside him, knee bouncing uncontrollably, phone buzzing nonstop in his hand. Every vibration felt like another spark waiting to ignite. "Don't read them," Jimin said quietly. Jungkook let out a breathless laugh. "It's too late, I already did." Jimin glanced at him, and half the world thinks I'm a genius," Jungkook replied, eyes dark, "and the other half thinks I just destroyed everything." Jimin nodded slowly. "That sounds about right." The car finally stopped. Doors opened. Security formed a barrier as they were ushered inside the building. The noise faded, replaced by a suffocating quiet. Inside the private lounge, the air was tense, thick with unshed anger and fear. Jungkook tossed his phone onto the couch and ran both hands through his hair. "They're calling me selfish," he said suddenly. "They say I dragged you into my mess." Jimin stiffened. "Did you?" Jungkook turned to him sharply. "No, I told them it was my choice." "And did you tell them," Jimin said, voice calm but cutting, "that I stayed silent for years?" Jungkook faltered. "That silence wasn't protection," Jimin continued. "It was consent. I let the lie live because it was easier than facing what it meant." Jungkook stepped closer, frustration rising. "Then why does it feel like I'm the only one being punished for honesty?" Jimin's eyes flashed. "Because you were the one brave enough to speak first." The words landed heavy. Jungkook's shoulders slumped. "I didn't want you to pay for it." "I already was," Jimin replied, just quietly. Silence stretched between them, sharp and uncomfortable. Jimin walked toward the window, staring down at the city below, lights scattered like broken constellations. "You know what scares me the most," Jimin said softly. "Not the rumors, not the backlash, it's that part of me is relieved." Jungkook's voice was barely above a whisper. "Me too." Jimin turned back, emotion raw in his eyes. "That relief makes me feel guilty, like I wanted this explosion." Jungkook shook his head. "You wanted truth, there's a difference." "Is there?" Jimin challenged. "Truth has consequences." "So does silence," Jungkook shot back, heat flaring. "And I was drowning in it." Jimin inhaled sharply. "You think I was?" The argument ignited fully now, years of restraint unraveling. "You shut me out," Jungkook said, voice breaking. "Every time I got close, you stepped back." "Because getting close to you felt like losing control," Jimin snapped. "And control was the only thing keeping me upright." Jungkook laughed bitterly. So you chose control over me. Jimin flinched. I chose survival. Jungkook's eyes filled. And where did that leave us? The question hung between them, devastatingly honest. Jimin's voice softened. It left us here. Jungkook stepped closer, anger melting into pain. Say it then. Say you felt something too. Jimin's breath trembled. You don't get to demand that. I've waited long enough, Jungkook replied. I deserve to know if I was alone in this. Jimin closed his eyes, the walls inside him finally collapsing. You weren't, he said. You never were. Jungkook froze. I felt it, Jimin continued, voice cracking. Every glance, every almost touch, every song you pretended wasn't about me, I felt all of it. Jungkook's chest rose sharply. Then why? Because I was terrified that if I let myself want you, Jimin interrupted, I'd want you more than the life I was taught to protect. Jungkook swallowed hard. And now? Jimin met his gaze, eyes wet but steady. Now I don't know how to unfeel what's already been exposed. They stood inches apart, the tension unbearable, the pull undeniable. A knock on the door shattered the moment. The manager entered, face pale. There's been a development, he said. A former producer just went public. He claims he knew the song's meaning months ago. He's implying the company suppressed it. Jungkook's eyes widened. What? Jimin's stomach dropped. That turns this into something bigger. The manager nodded grimly. It's escalating. Legal teams are involved. Statements are being rewritten as we speak. Jungkook laughed hollow. So now it's a war. Jimin reached out without thinking, grabbing Jungkook's wrist. Look at me. Jungkook did. No matter how loud this gets, Jimin said firmly, we don't turn on each other. Jungkook's voice trembled. Promise. Jimin squeezed his wrist. I'm done running. The manager hesitated. Are you sure about this path? Jimin didn't look away from Jungkook. For the first time in my life, he said, yes. Later that night, when the building finally emptied and the noise dulled into distant echoes, Jimin and Jungkook sat side by side on the floor, backs against the couch, exhaustion weighing them down. I'm scared, Jungkook admitted quietly. Jimin nodded. So am I. But I don't regret it, Jungkook added. Jimin allowed himself a small, honest smile. Neither do I. Outside, the world continued to argue, speculate, and divide itself into sides. Inside, two people sat in the aftermath of truth, shaken but unbroken, knowing that whatever followed would be irreversible, but at least it would be real. The night thinned into morning, and with it, the noise finally softened. Jimin woke to a pale strip of sunlight cutting across the lounge floor. His body ached, not from collapse this time, but from the weight of everything that had been carried for too long. Jungkook was still asleep beside him, head tilted awkwardly against the couch, lashes casting shadows on tired skin. For a moment, Jimin simply watched him breathe, steady and real, and felt something inside his chest loosen. He stood quietly and walked to the window. The city looked ordinary now, stripped of drama in daylight. Cars moved. People lived. The world hadn't ended overnight. His phone buzzed once. Jungkook stirred. Is it bad? He asked, voice rough with sleep. It's loud, Jimin replied honestly, but it's not killing us. Jungkook sat up, rubbing his eyes. I dreamed you disappeared. Jimin turned, surprised by the softness in his voice. I'm here. Jungkook looked at him then, really looked, as if confirming it with his own eyes. You usually leave first. Jimin exhaled. I know. They sat in silence for a while, the kind that no longer felt like avoidance. Eventually, Jungkook spoke again. Do you hate me for starting this? Jimin shook his head slowly. No, I hated myself for letting it stay buried. Jungkook's throat bobbed. I didn't mean to force you. You didn't, Jimin said. You just stopped lying. That truth settled gently between them. Later, when the executives called again, the conversation was calmer. Plans were adjusted, boundaries negotiated. Not everything was won, but something essential was no longer negotiable, their humanity. When the call ended, Jimin felt strangely light. As they prepared to leave, Jungkook hesitated by the door. "What happens to us now?" he asked, not dramatic, just afraid. Jimin stepped closer, close enough that their shoulders brushed. "We go back to work," he said. "We keep singing, we keep living." "And us." Jimin met his gaze, unguarded. "We stop pretending we don't matter to each other." Jungkook let out a shaky breath, eyes shining. "That's enough." Outside, cameras waited, but this time Jimin didn't feel like collapsing. He straightened his shoulders, reached out, and briefly squeezed Jungkook's hand where no one could see. The song would be analyzed forever. The rumors would rise and fall. Some people would believe, others would deny. But the truth no longer lived only in lyrics. It lived in the way Jimin walked forward without flinching, in the way Jungkook stood beside him without apology, and in the quiet understanding that whatever name the world gave their story, it was finally honest. And that, at last, was enough.